You know, sometimes we like to improve the quality of our lives, and there are any number of ways one can do that. One of my personal favorite ways is, going to those seminars or, getting a coach, and it's becoming an increase, those personal growth seminars, classes. In a pre-pandemic world, they were becoming an increasingly popular way to spend weekends, go to a seminar, get your life together, good stuff. But something that occurred to me very recently over the past year that we've been in a pandemic is that this idea of, coaching and instant wellness and, just getting a life you love, like just right off the bat, it's prone to a lot of toxicity, as unfortunate as it sounds, and myopic thinking in terms of the way we treat each other and the way we understand coaching as individuals. I personally got inspired to talk about this because I was very much into personal growth and development throughout my teen years and my early 20s, and it's not that I vied away from it. Like, I still am talking to, a healer to this day to heal trauma from my past. But since I've been around this industry for a long time, I think it's time to really be critical and firm but fair with this issue. On that note, welcome to So to Speak. My name is Evan Mead.
I'm Lyle Gronecker.
And we have two awesome guests. One of them is making a return from our two-part Trump critique from the election cycle. We'd like to welcome back Jody Aberdeen, and now Brandon Shikafoni. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name, Brandon. Did I get it right? Shikafoni. Okay. Oh, cool. Shifoni. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah,
awesome. Shifoni. So I'm gonna let our two guests introduce themselves. Whoever wants to go first.
Jody, since you're the returner here.
Okay.
All right, sure thing. Thanks, Evan. So my name is Jody Aberdeen. I work as a professional writer, although what's, again, timely for this episode is that I am, in fact, returning to the coaching world full-time. Prior to this, I've had a lot of involvement with the same seminars that, we're going to discuss by other names in this episode. And personal growth has always been a part of my life, at least my grown-up life. And so I'm transitioning into a full-time coach that's certified in Evolved NLP through Avalon Empowerment, based in Toronto, Canada. And I'm a veteran of signpost education, as we will be referring to them, which is where I met Evan. Again, it's not the real seminar's name, but we don't want to get sued, so we're just calling it signpost.
Okay.
And really just, as I'm transitioning to that, I'm grappling a lot with the issues we're going to be talking about in the show. You could learn more about me and what I do at my website, www.jodyaberdeen.com, and I'm sure this will be up in the podcast description at some point too. So that's essentially me.
We'll link that in the podcast description for sure.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Brandon Shifoni, as Evan mentioned. Like Jody, I've also been certified through Avalon Empowerment. I also attended one signpost seminar that I'm sure we'll discuss in the moments to come. I'm actually fairly new to the personal development world. I only got involved in 2016, which was around 25 years of age for myself. And that's when I attended my first Avalon Empowerment seminar, and then I got my certifications through them. Since then, I've opened my own brand, Love Like You're Meant To, which is a relationship and couples coaching practice. I've also got, just recently actually finished my degree in behavioral psychology. And the reason I did that is because, as a coach, we're not really certified or able to provide people with what would be considered legitimate psychological help. So if I find that my clients need something more than traditional coaching, I have to sort of refer them. But if I have traditional psychology training, psychology certification, and whatnot, then I can help them in multiple ways. I don't need to sort of refer them off to someone else to sort of regain rapport and kind of help them figure out their what's going on in their lives. In addition to all this, I've also done a lot of stuff on the public speaking sector. I've hosted and run TEDx in the town of Newmarket. I am a former host of a public speaking franchise called Mo Mondays, and I also had my own event called Unbrand for a short period of time. Yeah. And that's really about me.
Yeah, cool. It's very much worth mentioning that both Lyle and myself have had a history of being subcontracted to do video and audio work for Mo Mondays. So Brandon is technically a client of ours. So it's so cool to have you on here today. I kind of want to... I don't mean to put Lyle in the hot seat, but considering how, like... the three of Brandon, Jody, and myself all have had, an in-depth experience with signpost education, where as we've done a lot of, at least one or many seminars with them, or one or many courses with them. Lyle, not so much. Lyle, why don't you tell your story with signpost education?
Very well. There's not much to say. I think this was during, 2016, when I was back in Toronto. I was getting in touch with you, that you recommended me to signpost, and I went to one of their introductory seminars, and it sounded not too bad. They were very it was basically all the stuff you hear in, like, when you're in school, like a lot of these, like, personal growth motivational speakers that you hear in assemblies all the time. And I was kind of queued up, but then I kind of saw the cost of it, and I wasn't really, I was kind of broke at the time, so I wasn't able to afford it, so, and then they were like, oh, well, we have other means of paying for it, and we have, like, plans installed, and I was like, I'm fine, I'll be good. And then Evan asked me to go to another signpost seminar, and it was exactly the same presentation.
Sorry about that.
So I was so bored, I was just doodling on a piece of paper, because I was like, yeah, I heard all this before. I was a little bit more skeptical. I was kind of, like, listening to a lot of stuff they were saying, and I was kind of like adjudicating how the participants of the seminar were feeling, and a lot of them really got roped along into it, and I was the only one who probably didn't want to go. Like, I was the only one who straight up said, oh no, I'm not interested.
That was the night I invited a couple friends of ours. Like,
yeah, you had a friend of yours come along.
Yeah,
too.
He did it that summer, and he seemed to get quite a bit out of it.
Okay.
We're not going to mention this friend by name, but he's a good guy.
Moving along.
Yeah.
So I started to get a lot of calls from the signpost group, and this is where the story kind of takes a darker turn. And from my experiences, they would call me at least once a week, and they would always be like, oh, please join one of our seminars. We have a weekly retreat. Please join us. We insist. You've been to 2 of our seminars. Surely you're interested. And I'm like, no, I can't afford your seminars right now. Like, I'm stretched pretty thin budget-wise, because I was working as a janitor at a time, so I couldn't even book time off. I had to keep working. And They started saying a lot of stuff that I would link to. I've heard this word tossed around with this group, cult-like behavior, and that's mainly when it comes to the indoctrination process, where they keep trying to kind of stir the direction of the conversation back to them and how you need to join them and they need you. That sort of stuff. Like, it was kind of skeeving me out after a while, because they kept calling me and I kept saying no, or I'd hang up on them, and they were being very persistent for about 2 months. And I even told Evan about this, like, Evan, these people are essentially harassing me, and I need you to tell them to back off a little bit.
That was it was really off-putting to hear that, because as someone who actually has coached with Signpost on several occasions, and I was in the middle of a coaching agreement with them back in 2016 up until the summer, I actually am very familiar with the process that the people who... let me just paint a picture. The only people who get paid to do work for Signpost are the office administrators who work full-time at the Signpost office in any given city where they're located in the world. Namely, in this case, the Toronto office. The Signpost forum leaders, as we're going to call them, they get the people who lead the weekend courses get paid, but everything else you do with them, if you coach with them or lead a seminar with them, it's basically you're donating your own time. They don't like to call it volunteering. They like to call it assisting. But the people who make these calls and who called you, Lyle, are doing so on their own time. They're not getting paid. And they really shouldn't be calling you any more than 3 times. I know this because I was trained in the procedure. So I don't know if that, and I actually brought it directly to the assistant Senate manager, but unfortunately they kind of put it back on me as like, they kind of made it, they had this way of making it feel like it was my fault he was getting so many calls instead of like, doing what you're trained to do and backing off after 3 attempts. Even
2 attempts is attempts too many. I mean,
the third time is actually Jody, why don't you refresh me on the rules, because I'm kind of blanking out. Is it like
they're supposed to stop if you request to be taken off the list. Right now, I want to preface too, I'm pretty sure this was prior to new laws that went into effect in Canada about information, holding somebody's information. I don't know if that's only electronic, but if you tell somebody to take your name off of their list and not call you again, they're supposed to do that.
Yeah.
And the procedure is this, right? Like if you said no twice, right? This is I am misremembering this definitely, but the ballpark, whether it's 2 attempts, 3 attempts, even just 1. What I do recall is that, they're supposed to take you off the list, regardless if you request it.
Yeah.
And, so I complained to the office about that, because I was coaching with them at the time, and it's like, you guys shouldn't have called them more than twice, and it should not have gone on for a month. So, not necessarily on behalf of Signpost. I'm apologizing to you as like your friend and your comrade and collaborator. Like I personally apologize for that. They shouldn't have done that. But this is kind of the attitude that we want to feed into in this episode. Like I call the episode I've kind of come to call, cons in coaching, because if this story to our listeners rings true for anyone, it's not it's almost a bit of a cliche story, dare I say it, because this kind of stuff these off-putting experiences with coaches or with, gurus, it happens far too often. And I don't know which exactly is worse. The fact that, some coaches just don't take no for an answer, or, have a really toxic way of, it's not that their intention is good, their methods are just a little questionable. Like, they want you to have a great life. They just don't really care how you get from point A to point B. So, and I've also noticed this. I've noticed this with, there are figures like, Tony Robbins, Kevin Trudeau, or even Donald Trump. We're going to keep the politics to a minimum, but because Donald Trump, before he was president of the United States, he had a history of, being, an investment guru and an investment mogul. Trump University was very much a thing. But so the reason I brought up Tony Robbins and Kevin Trudeau, they both have great messages. I've listened to their work. They have great messages and it's very inspiring, but unfortunately, they're not integrous people. Like, Tony Robbins has been the subject of questionable allegations. Kevin Trudeau actually wound up in jail for selling a fraudulent book. And Trump needs no introduction, so yeah.
I'd almost argue, you mentioned that they want you to have a great life and they don't really care you get to point A to point B. I'd almost argue some of them don't want you to have a great life. They just want to sell you their product. And what sells more than the promise of a better life?
Mm-hmm. That's very much
Whether it be in finances, whether it be in improvement in your relationship. I feel like the practices of these people really determine whether or not they actually want you to have a great life, or if they're just trying to sell you what equates to what they know you're going to buy. Because, I mean, as I said, who doesn't want a better life?
Yeah.
Precisely.
And that's kind of, that's a very good point. But yeah, with the whole, but here's the thing, where it's becoming problematic is that, I'll tell a quick story of like why I didn't necessarily cut all ties with Signpost. I just started, volunteering for them or assisting for them less and less. And the reason for that is because I was exposed to their work when I was, when I was like 13, and through my teen years, it inspired me. And through my 20s, it gave me the courage to pursue filmmaking. Like, the stuff I learned gave me the courage to pursue filmmaking. But this is where, around the same time I started getting inspired, I also started the way that, I, as an individual with ASD, the way I experience anxiety, as I evolve, as I grow up, I learn new things about my anxiety that I didn't know before. Like, because every new situation I find myself in is going to present anxiety in one way, shape, or form. So, there is a point where, despite the fact that Signpost claims to be very diverse and very friendly to differences, it almost, I don't want to say that they didn't want to, disacknowledge the fact that I was ASD. They didn't want to ignore the fact that I was ASD. They gave me this cliche message of, your ASD does not define you, and it doesn't stop you. It can't stop you from doing the things that you want to do with your life. And I completely agree with that. But unfortunately, if they sometimes believe that a little too much. And so one of the things that they like to do at Signpost is they like to constantly push their participants and their coaches and their seminar leaders to challenge themselves in many ways. And how I interpreted this pushing was, in 2016, which is around the time Lyle came to their introductory sessions, I was at a point where, like, my ambitions were beyond the limit of the sky. So I started setting unrealistic goals for myself, in terms of, my film career and personal goals, like, in my life. And one after another, I kept missing, because one of the things, when you set a goal, they always will demand that you give an end date as to by when you want to, by when you want to achieve this goal. And a very common goal that a lot of people who do Signpost courses meet is that the entrepreneurs will say, I'm going to make, my first $1 million by the end of the year. A lot of these people are successful and a lot of these people aren't. They like to dwell more on those who are successful than those who aren't successful, for obvious reasons. And those who aren't successful at the goals they set for themselves, as per pressure from the organization, it's not that they're ignored, we just don't think about them very much. And that's kind of a problem with, this industry as a whole. And eventually my anxiety became so high, and I stopped. I was a coach for a self-expression program with Signpost, and my anxiety got so bad that I didn't feel comfortable going to coach anymore. But I finished my agreement. I didn't bail on them. They would never forgive me if I did that. But so what I did was I finished out my agreement. I bid my participants, the participants I was working with, a farewell, and I was happy to work with them and coach them. And then I just didn't do anything related to Signpost consistently for a very long time. And it's not that I haven't been back since. Like, if I think that the course can make a difference for someone and they can afford it, I will recommend it to them. But I'm never going to, urge them to come up with the money, because they like to sell this as it's like a now or never, do or die, get your life back on track. They like to, every personal growth mogul will like to sell themselves as the thing that's going to make or break your life. And that's an issue I have, because once you get familiar with this industry, every coach and organization in this industry likes to sell themselves like that. Signpost just has that kind of pressure on steroids, and that pressure is not good for my anxiety. So I stepped
Mine either.
I stepped away from that. I don't like, because as I kept setting on, as per their coaching, I'm sorry to sound like a broken record, but I started setting unrealistic goals for myself, and I wasn't meeting them, and then I felt miserable. So when it no longer became fun to participate in their work anymore, I did what they never want you to do. I took a break, and and I stepped away, and the whole concept of being disappointed with a product is actually, it kind of reminds me of a story in the similar vein that Lyle showed me like last year. What's the Jilly juice thing that? Oh god.
Oh, we're gonna talk about that, huh?
Okay.
Jilly juice. Why does this sound familiar?
All right, story time, ladies and gentlemen. Jilly juice. You're gonna like this. Jilly juice was a fermented medical supplement released in 2016 by Jillian Mighty Epperly. Despite her having no medical or scientific background, she claimed that her discovery was capable of fungal and parasitic removal. And brace yourself, here's a list here. Jilly juice had the medical properties to make you live up to 400 years. It could help you regenerate your limbs. It could cure all cancers of all stages, didn't matter which part of the body it was. Could cure type 2 diabetes, AIDS, Down syndrome, ADHD, autism, as well.
Whoa, I'm triggered by that. Jesus.
As well as homosexuality.
Now I'm really fucking triggered. Jesus Christ. And she went on Dr. Phil, didn't she?
Yeah, I'll mention that in the end. Now you're probably wondering, what is this made of? What magical properties does Jilly Juice have? Well, it consists largely of a cabbage or kale base mixed with water and pink Himalayan salt. The taste has been compared to raw sewage by previous clients. After examination and many case studies, the medical community were highly skeptical of Epperly's claims and deduced that not only was Jilly Juice an ineffective form of medicine, but was also potentially harmful to clients, in large part to its heavy salt content. The largest demographic of those who ingested Jilly Juice during its distribution were often desperate patients who were diagnosed with cancer and other such terminal conditions. Those who tried it began to show signs of headaches, fever, dizzy spells, emaciation, diarrhea, hypertension, strokes, and severe dehydration. On July 20th, 2017, a client named Bruce Wilmot, who was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, died after only using Jilly Juice for about a month. Epperly defended her claims by saying that Wilmot did not consume enough Jilly Juice, and that his subscriptions to other medications, as well as consuming pineapple juice, were more contributing factors to his death rather than her product. She also wrote that she could not be held accountable for any Jilly Juice-related deaths, stating correlation does not equal causation. Now, you're probably wondering, how can she peddle this with no permits saying that this stuff is, beneficial in any way, and the fact that, now someone's died of it? Well, she thought around that. Epperly does not manufacture or distribute her product. She sells the recipe and gives instructions on what to do to take it. So she basically gives people the keys to the castle, but she doesn't, build a castle for them. This is how she's been able to avoid legal action several times by selling the recipe and not the actual product itself. Naturally, many took to criticize Epperly and her product. However, a small yet sizable online following grew around her. Naming themselves the Poop Cult, over 58,000 engaged in social media supporting the product and its benefits. It's kind of hard to say whether it's they were actually in support of the product, or if they were just...
If they were shills.
If they were trolling, or if they were shills, or if they were paid. It's not easy to say, but petitions were made on change.org to ban this group and to put a stop to Epperly for false medical claims, and she has been reported many times to the Food and Drug Administration and the FTC and many medical boards and general offices. And thankfully, the official group was eventually shut down on Facebook and is now defunct.
See, it's not limited to just courses here, folks. It's in medicine as well.
Yeah. If you want to have a laugh, she does have an interview with Dr. Phil, basically exclaiming the multiple uses that her juice contains, and Dr. Phil is just totally aghast in every single claim she does. And yeah, and she even has an interview with like the patients who were hurt by her juice, and yeah, she was pretty snide about it as well.
I've seen this interview. It's unethical.
No, she's a very unethical woman, and I'm very like this is a kind of like this almost goes into snake oil salesman territory where it's like
it's exactly snake oil sales territory.
It's very
exactly what it is.
It's very frustrating that she actually targets people who are very desperate and are very sick.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I think that's very that shows a lot of malice to her character, that she's willing to rip off these people and like ruin their health as a result.
yeah.
Well, it's interesting you actually talk about that because I've seen that also in the finance industry, because there's a lot of these MLM style finance industries or finance organizations basically that are like, hey, come and be financial planners, get your certifications really easy, make all this money because well, you know you don't have any money and this is really easy for you to do to try and get money. And before you know it, you're sucked into this thing, this MLM style thing where you have to go out and get your own clients. There's no real instruction, and it's all you kind of dug yourself this hole because you're desperate and you need money, and these people offered you a way out, and what it appeared to be easy, but it turns out no, that's not really the case because you have to. There's all these parts that they didn't really go into a little more deeply to sort of let you know what you need to do to be successful. And before you know it, you're worse off than you were when you started.
Yeah, just for the record, I've been to at least 3 introductory sessions from multi-level marketing organizations. I even participated in one of them for less than 6 months, I think it was. I don't even remember how long, but it's very much the same. Like, the energy, the bullshit alarm in my mind kept going off when I was participating with them, and no matter how many, the thing that actually kind of, killed my ability to get clients and to, sign people up was, if I don't believe in this product enough to sell it, and I can't bullshit myself enough to believing that I believe in this product, then I can't sell it and I can't get clients. So I cannot walk around as an inauthentic person when selling this product that I think is going to make your life better. And
yeah, right. I'm feeling this. There's been a lot of stuff that y'all have said. I just want, before we get too far, I just wanted to go back to what you were saying, Evan, and just sort of comment, which ties into what Lyle has just brought up. There's a few themes, right, that have come up that are everywhere, and in addition to what Brandon just raised with MLMs. Yeah. So, if it was just a simple matter of these organizations being bad, they wouldn't be thriving. The reason they thrive isn't only predatory either, because if word got out that that's all they were doing, then nobody would give them money, right? They wouldn't survive for too long. So that means that organizations like Signpost definitely have value. I know for myself, like, it was one of the best decisions I've made, because it's led me to this path where, well, frankly, all of us here are having this conversation.
Yeah.
Right? Because at some point, I registered for Signpost, but here's my registration story is actually relevant to this.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Lyle, were you done? I didn't want to cut you off if you had anything prepared that you didn't finish.
No, I wrapped up my thoughts on Jilly Juice. I have another thing to mention, but that can be later.
Yeah.
That was just a taster.
Okay.
No pun intended.
Okay.
Oh, God.
Okay, so Jilly Juice. So what's funny about that is, like, that's legitimate snake oil. The reputation was like, that term, it comes from the last, 2 centuries ago, where it's like, near the turn of the century, there was this really whimsical time in, U.S. and Canadian history where around the late 1890s, 1890s into the 1910s, you had this kind of strange overlap between superstitious types of things, right? But it was like proto-science. It was like they wanted to get, you would get things like you would have simultaneously people developing radio, and like automobiles, but also people having seances and whatnot, right? And having around literally selling snake oil, just oil, squeezed out of dead snakes, and then pitching them as miracle cures for everything. And that's where it comes from. It's like it doesn't. It's basically something that looks like a cure, and it's not. And that's exactly what they've been pitching, is like snake oil. That's exactly what Jilly Juice is. And it's just something too. Like you mentioned, like the stretch goals, Evan.
Yeah.
Like the stretch goals are good. Like they can, as with anything, this is one of those things where there's value in the stretch goals.
Are we talking?
If you would,
sorry to interrupt you, Jody.
Go ahead.
I've never heard the term stretch goals goal, but I think I know what you're getting at. The term I'm thinking of is smart. Is it
it's
smart?
Goals where you're basically told to basically set these goals. You're going to be this place in your business. You're going to be this place in your career, right?
I was told that it's called SMART goals, which was actually a term coined in a Canadian business magazine in the 1980s.
Yeah, these aren't necessarily SMART goals. Like I'm not talking. It's not an acronym, right?
Okay.
When I say stretch goals, and I realize now as you're kind of calling me on it, that's my term. That's my lingo.
Oh, okay. No worries.
So that's like when I say a stretch goal, it's literally a goal that causes you to stretch your beliefs about yourself, right?
Yeah.
To get you out of your comfort zone. And so, like for a lot of entrepreneurs, yes, maybe setting a goal of $100,000 at the end of the year, when all up until now you've only grossed maybe 40,000, is a stretch.
Yeah.
It's going to force you to take different actions that you wouldn't have taken otherwise. It's going to force you to get uncomfortable and to grow into them. There's value in doing that. Where it becomes demoralizing is where whoever your coach is basically causing you to constantly set these, either your goals are too low, where you're just not really growing anyway. You're just doing what you normally do, and the coach can then say, hey, that's a win, even if it's a cheap win. Or they're too lofty, like you're overreaching because your coach thinks that you're capable of more than what's physically possible at the time. Right?
Yeah.
We're not talking about developing superhuman powers, but there's that belief that half the people that drank the Jilly Juice, they bought the Jilly Juice and drank it or made the recipe, right?
Yeah.
Really badly wanted to believe that the juice could do more than what it obviously did. And the thing about the benefit of personal growth is, like, if you're in that position where you're willing to believe that you're capable of more, and you do follow some of the basics, you can benefit a lot from that. Like, I benefited quite a lot from my time at Signpost. And I knew when I was complete with it.
Yeah.
Like, and the moment that I knew I was complete with it, is basically the moment where you kind of, like, the spell wears off, right? I use this Cinderella metaphor a lot with it. It's like the coach turns back into a pumpkin.
Yeah.
And the minute, like, when you're in these seminars, right, it really does feel like, because you're in a large group of people and you're all kind of talking about these highfalutin concepts and you're all kind of sensing possibility, it's like you're playing a game. And your willingness to suspend your skepticism and your disbelief that this stuff works, right, is just you're all too willing to do that at that point when you're in it.
Yeah.
What is remarkable, though, is that when the spell is broken, you're complete. You're kind of done. And the moment that happened for me was I was the assistant coach at Signpost, the same as you, right? I think we might have been in the same program. If not, maybe I was in the one before you.
Yeah, we were in the same program. It's just I was a participant, you were a coach. I coached the next program after that.
You coached the next program, yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, again, I say this with tremendous gratitude for the time I was there, and I'm complete with it because the leader of that program, and I'm not going to name her, but she had said something like, if you think your life is hard with this, imagine how hard your life will be without this. Now, the context of why she said that was, we had a meeting of the coaches. We would have a meeting of the coaches prior to the formal session with our paying participants, right?
Yeah.
The coaches were all there as volunteers, and you get coaching experience that's actually very valuable, I think, right? It's the best it's like free training in exchange for your time, right?
Yeah.
And somebody who was, the session took place in Toronto at the Toronto office, and somebody from Hamilton was complaining that it's hard for them to make every meeting because of the traffic involved. Even if you're taking the train, there's still time. Because they were working a day job that ended right at 5. The session's at 7. You had to get there sooner, right? So you can make the meeting and stuff.
Oh, worse. If you're a coach, you have to be there at 6. And
you had to be there at 6, right? So that's hard to do for those of you not in the Toronto area. It is downright impossible during pre-pandemic lockdown. It was impossible for you to make it across town across the corner of Lake Ontario
to get from
Hamilton to Toronto
from Hamilton
that time, unless you had a helicopter.
Exactly. Like, in what reality are you gonna have? Because you have to take a major highway to get. It's like the Canadian equivalent of an interstate. In what reality are you gonna get from Hamilton to Toronto in an hour during rush hour?
Yeah,
it's just not doable.
And she was and the coach was pointing this out to the seminar leader. And she said it's very hard to do this. And then that's when the seminar leader said, if you think your life is hard with this, imagine how hard your life will be without all of this. And that was when I kind of stopped. I kind of went, I was like, I thought the purpose, because the stated purpose of most of these personal growth trainings and seminar trainings is that you go out into the world to reach people who do not have the access to this in order to share it with them. There's this kind of missionary emphasis of going and spreading the gospel of whatever this is, right? Whatever, right?
And a lot of coaches are very.
Well, let me finish that thought because I'm gonna forget, right? So the thing about that is if she's basically saying that life is hard without this, and that which implies that we gotta keep signing up and doing this over and over again. I'm like, what's the point? It's like if I get trained at a university, if I go to university and get a degree in engineering or medicine. Right?
Yeah.
What engineering or medical prof would tell me, sorry, it's really, you got to keep coming back for classes because it's really hard to do. You can't do medicine unless you're coming back to your class every week, right?
Yeah.
That's bullshit. That is, right? Either we're trained to go deal with the world as is, or your approach to personal development is actually trying to keep me coming back as well, right?
Yeah.
You don't really, as you said, it's as Brandon kind of hinted, is you don't really care about changing the world. You just care that I keep coming back and giving you my money and time.
Exactly. And to that point, I think Evan brought it up earlier where he was talking about they make it so that, or they at least try to make you feel like your life can't function without this program. And that's one of the big things I feel like a lot of the coaching guys do is they're you need this to survive. And I can show for Avalon just for a moment. I feel like that's one great thing that they do great as a small organization is that they make you very aware, and I personally can attest to this, that they're knowing what they know and how to do what they do can help improve your life, but you don't need it to live.
Exactly.
And that's one of the many, many things I think they do wonderfully, and that Signpost just doesn't do in the sense that, and I've only gone to one seminar with Signpost. And as you said, you all got tremendous value from it, and I'm no exclusion to that. I definitely learned a lot about integrity through the seminar that I did. But it was at that point where I feel like they kind of, I had a little bit of an experience like Lilo did, where they called me a time or 2 or 3 or 5, and they made it seem like Brandon, you need to keep doing this, otherwise, you're not gonna live your best life. And I'm sitting here thinking watch me.
Yeah.
Watch me.
Watch me. That is exactly one of the things that I would say. Just watch me. When I hit my moment, where I said I was done was not that I was done. It wasn't a breakup where I was just okay, I'm done with you. I just stopped going to their sessions for a very long time. I kind of half-mindedly said I'm going to quit my job. I was working a full-time retail job at the time, and I said that in this post-mortem coaching session, the seminar leader said, what's something you guys can really do to challenge yourselves? And I got sick of coming in every week hearing, what are you not doing in your life? It's demoralizing, like Lyle or Brandon said. One of you guys said demoralizing. And I think that's a very apt description. So, a coach I was good friends with who actually was really claimed to be really inspired by me, and I believe that they still are, because I'm still friends with them to this day. At the time, they said, "So, Evan, are you going to quit your job by the day you said you were going to?" I don't even remember what day I said, but I said, at the time, I was feeling a little unsure, and I said, "I'll give it a go." And then they laughed in my face. And I'm like, so there is very much, whether it's malicious or not, there is a self-righteousness to this business. And it's very hard for me to differentiate who truly cares about helping people and who doesn't. I've met coaches that I can believe with my intuitive sense that, yes, you truly care about helping people and making life better for the world and for yourself. But a lot of these coaches, unfortunately, are in it for their own self-interest and to stroke their own egos. It's very sad to see.
And to that point as well, Evan, there is a predatory aspect to the personal growth and coaching industry. It is almost geared towards people who are desperate. So I want to go back to Lyle talking about the Jilly juice, right?
Yeah.
One of the people, the types of people that they would target were cancer patients. You said, right? Or terminal illness?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, yeah. So when you're in the the doctors have basically told you that they've done everything that they can do to help you, and that now it's just they don't know, right?
Yeah.
Either you're going to die or it's just going to go away, but they'll never tell you that. I'd rather just tell you, just prepare yourself.
Yeah. When
that happens, people will naturally turn to solutions outside traditional medicine, which is fair. There's things that at that point you've tried everything that we know. So let's try to do some more experimental stuff.
Yeah.
However, the fact that she then went and when she launched this thing, she found those legal
loopholes,
protections about like this. You're downloading the recipe. You're the one making it. I'm not responsible for that, right?
Yeah.
Says obviously that on some level she's aware that this doesn't work, right? And it's something like they know that they can get predatory people. They know that they can get like MLMs, right? MLMs themselves, the reason why MLMs and seminars like Signpost and things like that are very similar. Like here's a factual one that I can name. I can mention by name. Bob Proctor. Actually, Bob Proctor has actually been reviled lately. As kind of in that same kind of snake oil thing, not because necessarily of his teachings, but because he was tied to an MLM company that he was co-owner that was run by his wife, and he kept promoting through his stuff, right? I forget the name, but he'd been taken to task for that because the MLM was essentially run in that same kind of format. And it's not necessarily a cult. One friend of ours, Evan, had pointed out that it's not so much that the people who go to Signpost, that Signpost itself is a cult, or that Tony Robbins is a cult, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
It's that guys like Tony Robbins, Bob Proctor, the leaders in these industries, they tend to attract culty people. That is like, if they just turned the screws on a little bit. If they just tighten them a little bit more, they could get them for life. And a great cinema, and this isn't anything new either. This was in the pop culture. I think of the character Miss Farmer in Donnie Darko.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah.
We love that movie. Brandon, have you seen Donnie Darko? Brandon, still there?
Anyways, going to
Sorry,
your point.
having technical difficulties here. I'm here. No, I haven't seen it.
Oh, we highly recommend it. But no, I'm gonna let Lyle and Jody just go off on your own chat about this because Miss Farmer.
we could delve into Donnie Darko a lot, but I want to stay on topic too, right?
Yeah.
So, but the character Miss Farmer, there is a motivational speaker in the town of Middlesex, where the story takes place, named Jim Cunningham. He's played very excellently by the late Patrick Swayze.
Yes.
And Jim Cunningham is the embodiment. He's like a caricature of like those predatory motivational speaker coaches and whatever that go around, right? essentially peddling video courses and things of that nature that are like, it's basically easy solutions, right? Simple solutions to problems. But when he's later uncovered to be a child pornographer, right?
Yeah.
And he's arrested on child pornography charges. Miss Farmer, who is like an administrator at the school where Donnie Darko goes, right, rushes to his defense, saying, "Oh no, this is clearly a vast conspiracy against a great man."
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of see similarities lately, where like there's a refusal to accept responsibility for the impact of what you do.
Exactly.
There's a refusal to acknowledge a willful blindness, or like maybe you really are that you're that taken with the person or with the teaching that you just you cannot and will not see reality when it's given to you. That obviously if this person that you believed in so much, what do they call it? The backfire effect, right? When you have attached emotional significance and part of your identity to these teachings and practices, when the people or the organizations behind those teachings and practices are exposed to be, pretty bad or pretty negative people, or they're doing something illegal or immoral, you're less likely to, because you have so much invested in them, you're less likely to believe the truth that they're bad, and more likely to believe it's some type of conspiracy, right? Or that the powers that be. Kevin Trudeau did this, right? Even from jail, it's like, I'm in jail because my information is so secretive and so mind-blowing and so threatening to the elites that they put me in jail. They came up with these trumped-up charges, right?
Yeah.
It's funny that you use that terminology, seeing as Trump is a grand example of this.
Yeah, and then going back to our old friend, Mr. Trump, no longer President Trump, right?
Yeah.
The fact that he got there, right? Like, he went to churches when he was a kid. His family would go to churches led by Norman Vincent Peale, who's one of the founding, figures in the personal growth industry as we know it. And Norman Vincent Peale would give these seminars and lectures, at certain Christian churches in Texas, New York, all over the States and parts of Canada and elsewhere.
Right.
And so Donald, no doubt, he knows how to brand himself. He knows how to create. He created a name for himself.
Yeah.
And a reputation such that it was synonymous with wealth and success, even though much of it was not real.
Yeah.
And anyone who actually worked with him knew this about him.
Yeah.
And but that doesn't change millions of people from believing the brand.
It's true.
And that's part of it too. Is like, and when you show like the thing about the Capitol riots, right, January 6th, the thing about that I found both kind of funny and horrifying is that the big boogeyman that they set up among the Trump followers was Antifa, right?
Yeah.
And they it's like, oh well, something bad's going on. It's got to be Antifa, right? So you had all these diehard Trumpists, right? They're doing essentially what he said and raiding the Capitol building. And then when the time came to hold them accountable, either Trump or somebody else basically started the rumor that, oh no, those people there are just Antifa dressed up as Trump people.
It wasn't Trump himself. He was in an awkward position where it was like, okay, I think his lawyers, because remember, a couple days after, he gave this speech that a lot of people thought was disingenuous, where he conceded the election fine-a-fucking-ly, and then he said, there's going to be a new administration, I will no longer be president, the riot was unacceptable and atrocious, and every single person there needs to be held accountable. Someone in his inner circle, or someone within the QAnon circles, started the whole Antifa did this.
Yeah. So what's funny is this. I have relatives who are Trump people, and when I made the mistake of letting them back onto Facebook, I was off Facebook for a while, and then I got a second account. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But I re-added them, forgetting why I had deleted them in the first place, right? It's like, they commented immediately, oh, that's Antifa causing trouble. It's like, but imagine this. Imagine you are so taken with a movement or a leader that you are motivated to do this thing, right? This very dramatic, highly illegal, downright treasonous thing, right? And then when you do the thing, you get the same people who you did it for, who inspired you to do it, disown you and call you the bad guy.
Yeah.
right?
It's truly
it's just mind blowing. But that
is
the degree to which like this predatory aspect, because really in these are complicated times. That's the understatement of like the year, right?
yeah.
But in complicated times, the brain wants to find simple answers, right? We just don't have the bandwidth or the load to deal with the complexities a lot of the time, especially if they're hitting us at home with like our money, with like our physical well-being, like with the virus, right?
Yeah.
Remember the first bit, all these guys were basically saying, that this virus was a hoax. Some people are still saying that. Even as people are dying around them, there's people who are dying in the hospitals on respirators, and they were saying, this isn't real, the doctors are doing this to me, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I'm seeing a lot of people in my my own personal community who I used to look up to as personal empowerment, personal development gurus and leaders and thought leaders coming out with this sort of stuff too. And it's disheartening to me because, I once, as I said, looked up to these guys because they were doing great things and I thought they were doing great things, and now to come out and for them to be like, oh, it's all a conspiracy. I'm like, oh God.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can associate with you anymore.
Yeah.
I trained with a Bob Proctor. Sorry, I was cutting out there. I trained with a Bob Proctor coach in his corporate program, Thinking into Results. I actually have the training material. I completed it.
Yeah.
I'm sure I have a certificate somewhere, but it was essentially like that same guy, my coach for like 6 months, right, straight, went easily into the conspiracy stuff right away. And I think part of it is like if you're whether it's a part of a deliberate design on the recruitment of these individual coaches and programs, or if it just happens to be this thing, there are a large number of people who weren't served by the existing system of education, of work, of civic participation. The outliers basically are drawn to this stuff, right?
Yeah.
You see, how many people have we seen who we met through signposts and other places? When you add them on Facebook, their education includes something like School of Hard Knocks or School of Life, right?
Yeah. Some people will actually...
This isn't to be elitist, but they didn't go to university.
Yeah, like...
Right?
Going to signposts, I would like to stress, if you're looking to get a college degree or a university degree, you're not going to get that when you go to signposts. Although they might inspire you to go to college or university, but you're going to a class at signposts alone is not a university degree. And some people will put themselves on the same playing field as, someone who studied science for 6 years and has a bachelor's degree in medicine. So, and another thing that... Something that you actually kind of ruffled my feathers with the whole Capitol riot conspiracies, with how it wasn't actually us, it was Antifa. I think that's a hypocritical crock of shit. Sorry to be extreme with the language, and I'll tell you why. Just like you, and I have the conspiracy peeps within my own family and within, the personal growth world. I would like to stress that Signpost itself is not a political organization. They're not endorsed by any politicians, although many politicians, both liberal and conservative, have done courses with them. They're not a political organization. They're just trying to, point you in the direction to get your life straight. So when a lot of these people fall for the easy, oversimplistic ways of thinking, like, the Miss Farmer character from Donnie Darko, when the virus was declared a pandemic and when countries all over the world started locking down, the conspiracy peeps were there from the beginning, but no one was giving them the time of day because we were focused on staying home, isolating, making sure we didn't get sick, because COVID was really scary when it was when lockdown started happening, because we had never seen anything like this since the Spanish flu in 100 years. And the conspiracy peeps were writing stuff from the beginning. They were saying, oh, the reason Trump is the QAnon crowd was saying Trump is going along with the lockdowns even though he appears to not like them. He's going along with them. He wants to keep people in their homes so he can conduct mass arrests and dethrone this big global cabal that's been secretly running the world, and blah. And when the lockdown will be over by Easter, people will flock to churches and spiritual gatherings, and it'll be a great awakening for the planet. Do you know how many times the QAnon crowds were saying all throughout this pandemic that today arrests are going to happen? today the cabal is going to be overthrown, and it never happened. They were saying this up till Inauguration Day, and they're still saying this. For some reason, they said that March 2nd, 2021, Trump was going to, expose some bombshell evidence that was going to destroy the Biden administration. He was going to go back to the White House. He was going to be on Capitol Hill on March the 2nd, saying he was going to get re-inaugurated for his second term that he was entitled to, and it didn't happen. They keep believing this, and QAnon folks were saying, soon the people will rise up and take their power back. I want you guys to remember that. Soon the people will rise up and take their power back. And then when they actually try to do that on January 6th, they have the audacity to say, oh no, that was Antifa. I would tell these people to fuck off, because they're hypocrites. For 9 months, they were saying, people are going to take their power back. We're going to take their power back. Trump is going to save us all. He's going to inspire us to take our power back. We tried to take our power back unethically and immorally, and now you have the nerve to say Antifa did this? Get out of here.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull us back a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Topic, because I think we're getting a little bit.
Okay. On that note, I want to kind of talk. Can we talk about cults now? Because Lyle over here actually did some research into one particular one that kind of ties into what we're talking about.
Yeah, like a little while ago, Jody was mentioning how people who are part of a following can do some pretty reprehensible things all over based on the effects a leader can have on them. And I think probably the most infamous example of this would be the People's Temple, also known as Jonestown. So I have a little report on them. The People's Temple was a religious organization, which is what I'm going to call it, which was formed in 1954 by Reverend Jim Jones. It was one of the first religious groups to be racially progressive, allowing a multicultural following, as well as integrating socialist and communist beliefs into Christianity. Unlike Christianity, however, Jones ordered all of his followers to treat him as a man of divinity, rather than worshiping a deity such as Jesus Christ, and wanted to become an iconoclast. Essentially, Jones had constructed a cult of devoted worshippers who would heed his every order or be punished for any insubordination or disillusion very swiftly. An example of some of the things he did while during his tenure in the church, Jones would often give faith healings to attract people, gain income, and help develop any of his numerous projects. Followers were aware that his healings were fake, as he would often take chicken organs and other animal parts and pull them out of the flesh of his peers, saying how he was ridding their bodies of all malignant tumors. The money, however, was a necessity to finance their church and give resources to the poor, and as they saw it, it was a means to an end rather than an outright swindle. You're going to hear this term a lot, means to an end. It was often the term they used to justify any of their actions, whether it was to bully members in disdain with their group, or anyone who tried to dissuade the opinion of Jim Jones. The People's Temple began in Indiana, but soon expanded into San Francisco as well as Los Angeles. In the late 70s, Jones began to curry political favor over time, using his vast outreach to help politicians who needed support by sending hundreds of his followers to their campaigns. By the early 70s, Jones was highly regarded among his peers, receiving accolades from famous activists and politicians such as George Moscone, Jerry Brown, Mervyn DeMalley, as well as Harvey Milk. Jones even received a Martin Luther King Jr. Humanitarian Award in 1977 for his strides for racial equality and desegregation within his organization. So how about that? After preaching and lecturing about an idealized sanctuary of socialism and fearing police or media interference, Jim Jones decided to extradite himself and his followers by purchasing acres of land in Guyana and crafting a settlement called the People's Temple's Agricultural Project, affectionately named Jonestown. By 1978, the population of Jonestown grew to over 900 people. I'm just going to say how he the methods he would use to get his followers. Jones took many cues from Adolf Hitler as well as Father Divine by manipulating his followers to do his bidding. His most common trait was finding a common enemy within his group and rallying his flock to become militant and unify with him in order to have his followers be subservient. Things went to a head when U.S. Representative Leo Ryan was curious about the living conditions of Jonestown, and he formed an investigation including a small crew of advisors, journalists, and camera crew. After flying to Guyana, Ryan was warmly welcomed into the compound. He was very impressed by the way Jonestown was managed, and deemed it perfectly safe. Soon afterwards, however, Ryan was slowly informed by dissenting members of the temple that they felt threatened, mistreated, and scared for their lives, due to the heavy artillery that the compound had procured to make sure no one within ever left. Many wished to defect from Jonestown and escape. Ryan was discouraged by these revelations, and after being threatened at knife point by a militant member of the temple, he decided to take his team out of the compound early to warn the Senate. After docking the plane, armed militants from Jonestown stormed the airstrip, gunning down all the passengers in the plane, killing Ryan, 3 journalists, and one of the defecting members. Knowing that the authorities would inevitably catch wind of Ryan's assassination, Jim Jones ordered every single one of his followers to line up and consume cyanide-laced flavor aid. The followers were compliant, as Jones would often order them to take part in fake drills of drinking poisonous juice to normalize the idea of mass suicide. After consumption, the victims would be laid down on a wooden walkway outside of the villa while awaiting death. Jones' last recorded statement read as, "Die with a degree of dignity. Lay down your life with dignity. Don't lay with tears and agony. I tell you, I don't care how many screams you hear. I don't care how many anguished cries. Death is 1,000,000 times preferable to 10 more days of this life. If you knew what was ahead of you, if you knew what was ahead of you, you'd be glad to be stepping over tonight. We didn't commit suicide. We committed an act of revolutionary suicide protesting the conditions of an inhumane world." Jones's body was found with a self-inflicted headshot wound in his right temple. In the aftermath, 918 people had died. 276 of them were children. It is the largest death toll of American lives in a deliberate act up until the September 11th attacks. The horrific event later coined the term "drinking the Kool-Aid" as a result.
Well, yeah, that's a worst case scenario, folks, though, just for those of you listening at home.
Well, it's an example of how things can escalate.
Yeah.
When put in the wrong hands.
So, like, that's kind of ties into, everything we're talking about here. Like, I know that was very hard to listen to, but yeah, how you guys feeling over there? You good?
Yeah, yeah, as Lyle was reading, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I did learn about this years ago. I put it out of my head, I think.
Yeah,
That's fair.
I did a lot of research about cults when I was in high school, so I learned a lot about him as well as others, such as like Heaven's Gate and Branch Davidians. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it is worth mentioning that a lot of the this is why, like, because people are so scared of cults that they often associate organizations with having like cult-like tactics, like with Signpost. Signpost actually has a well-prepared response to the claim that they're a cult. They don't fit the description of the cult by the like logistical definition of a cult, but I would agree that some of their tactics come across.
Excuse me. Now, I'm going to uncharacteristically come to Signpost's defense on this.
Sure.
Because, right? I mean, like, again, if it was just a simple a decision as they're just evil and we shouldn't do them, then we wouldn't even be talking about them. Again, there's value in what they teach, right? One of the characteristics of cults is that they take you away from your family. One of the first things that Signpost does when you're done the weekend is send you home.
And they call no, they won't just send you home.
The first thing they do within the first 3 hours, they want you to call your relatives and basically just clean up stuff that you had to deal with.
Yeah.
Right. That you've left undone, and this is good. And in a way, I was listening to another. There's an interview that Will Smith did with Jay Shetty. That's on YouTube that recently got posted, and he was talking about his father and how Will's father had gotten a terminal diagnosis. And they had the conversations, right? Except that then his father ended up living well beyond the prognosis, right? For a few more months. And then Will said that every day every day that they had was a gift, and they said they made sure every time they said goodbye, they didn't leave anything uncommunicated, right? And that is a way to live. It's good, and Signpost encourages you to do that, to basically clear up the shit with your people you love, that you say you love, right? While they're still around to do that, and so that they're there to hear it. So there's value in that. And so, like, if it was a cult, they would be telling you to stay away, right? In fact, like, the emphasis on having, whether it's Signpost or some other place, right? The emphasis on having you go out into the world to make changes, it seems to be more of a, it's more of an evangelical. I'm not talking about the brand evangelical, but in terms of the small e evangelical approach of, like, going out and spreading the gospel, right? And that, in a way, is not, like, that's far from cult-like behavior. Cult-like behavior says we're special, and we're exclusive, and usually there's not just a cult in that case. There's a cult of personality. So I want to go back to MLMs for a second.
Yeah.
Right. They're all connected into this, because I was involved as a distributor, and with 2 MLMs, and I ended up the only reason I kind of picked them in the first place was because I got free product. Right.
Right.
Like,
Of course.
You pay the money, and you get like $300 worth of product for like $50, $60 or whatever. Right. You're supposed to sell it and make your money back, but I just kind of took it. Right. This coffee. And what's interesting there is, like, they would have, do you guys want to get on the phone with a billionaire? Well, we have the billionaire. He's the head of our company calling, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, this is the type of people to get. It's like, you want to say you talk to a billionaire? It's like, that doesn't appeal to me. You know what I mean? But it appeals to a lot of people. And then when these people who run the companies come down, they just usually in the trainings, they've had weeks of talking about, John Smith was this, John Smith is so great, John Smith is that. You get people showing up to meet the head of the MLM company who's dropping by for a visit, and they're treating him like a friggin' movie star.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I got autographs. Oh my God, you see people, like, they're at a Beatles concert almost, right?
Yeah.
It's like you see those pictures from, like, the 50s, right? The girls just losing their shit over the Beatles. They're losing their shit over some corporate guy that nobody outside the organization knows.
Yeah. Now, believe it or not, there was a time. Sorry to go back to Trump, but there was a time long before his presidential and political career where being in the same room with him was, a rank of honor. Like, to say you cross paths with him. I remember in the mid 2000s, like 10 years before he eyed the presidency, my mom went on a business trip to New York, and she said that she almost got into an event where Trump would have been present. And at the time, that was cool, because we associated him with wealth, with power, with the dream life. It was just that's the kind of what popped into my head.
And one of my close friends, one of my fraternity brothers in university, had gone to New York with his wife, happened to be eating at a restaurant where they spotted Donald Trump at a couple of tables down, right? Yeah. Now, this friend is they're not exactly well off, right? Like, they're doing good. Yeah. But, nonetheless, not compared to Trump, but nonetheless, the guy called, my buddy called the waiter over, said to buy Donald Trump a drink, right? Saves from us. So the guy did. Trump, apparently Donald got the drink, and the server pointed over to where my buddy was sitting, right? And his wife, and Trump waved at him, right? And this is like circa 2000, 2001, around the same time, right? Yeah. And apparently Donald came over and shook his hand, thanks for the drink, and then got to meet his wife, and they had a 5-minute chit chat, right? Yeah. And by my buddy's accounts, it was very pleasant. Yeah. Right? Very pleasant thing. And but it just kind of goes to show why, like, a blue collar worker, who's on this trip to this restaurant for him is a treat. For Trump, this is basically like a snack. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like a 3-star restaurant or whatever. Yeah. But he's still willing to buy him a drink. Why? Why do you want to meet this person? All he did is he made money. But he set up his cult of personality that way.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And again, sorry, Brandon, go ahead. Yeah.
No, it's okay. I was going to say, to a degree, I get it, because there is a lot of value in the whole "it's not what you know, it's who you know" thing. Like that, there is endless stories of people benefiting based on who they know and who they had a chance to talk to. That said, there's a call following in the sense of I want to be this person. I want to have the kind of wealth that they have. That's great. That's phenomenal. But you also have to kind of look at, and this is where people sort of get lost in the translation of things, is what does that person have to do to make their money?
Yeah.
You know, what kind of practices have they done? What sort of a predatory thing? And yeah, you can have all the money in the world, but is that the kind of person you want to be? Do you want to look in the mirror, you know, in 10, 20 years and be like, look, I have billions of dollars, but I fucked over a lot of people to get that. You know, is that the kind of individual you want to be, or you know, do you want to make your money with integrity in your heart, not having fucked over these people, and actually having made a difference in the world?
Yeah, and that kind of ties. That's a great point to segue into, you know, the rampant bypassing that most of the personal growth industry does. Right? They, you know, one of the big kind of tenets of belief in the personal growth world, right? Mitch Horowitz, he's a New York Times, the former head of Tarcher Penguin. He's now like, he's kind of like a punk rock scholar of New Age stuff. If you haven't read his stuff already, right? Mitch Horowitz calls it a catechism. It's like an off the shelf. You know when you say those old quotes that don't necessarily apply to the situation, right? Like, birds of a feather flock together, right? Or something like that.
Yeah.
It's in the New Age movement, in the personal growth movement, the idea that you don't need to worry about how it manifests, right? That's a catechism that we have. And so what ends up happening is people will set a money goal, for example. Now I'm setting up a straw man, but this corresponds to what we've seen a lot of people do. They'll say, I want to make $10 million, right? And
yeah.
what they do is they say, I don't know how, but it's going to happen. And then they end up getting involved in all these opportunities that come their way. They don't bother vetting whether they're ethical or not. They don't bother checking in to see whether it's criminal or not. They just know that it's going to make the money. And when you question them on the how, it's like, how do you care about, I don't have to worry about the how. You shouldn't have to worry about the how either. However you get rich is however you get rich. And that kind of like ethical free zone when it comes to that manifesting is how you see so many coaches get into trouble one after the other, right?
Yeah.
And maybe you know there's definitely a huge missing from this world where like they don't care. For example, like there's up until and you know I know that it's coming across that we're plugging Avalon, but that's because like I think Brandon and I are both in their training. Part of the reason I picked them is that part of the reason I picked them rather than say T. Harv Eker or like James Canfield coaching or something like that, right? Or Jack Canfield coaching is like they don't bypass issues like Black Lives Matter. They don't bypass discrimination. They don't bypass climate change, right? Or problems. They don't deny science. In fact, science is kind of, there's a bit of woo. There's some spirituality stuff, but it's fundamentally rooted in neuroscience. What they do.
Yeah.
And they also see what's the impact of the stuff that we have on the world, right? If I'm encouraging somebody else to go buy another fucking mansion, and the person decides to tear up some old growth forest to clear away the land that he bought with his or earned money to build that mansion, right? Is that worth it? That doesn't seem to be, the term is ecological that they use in our training, right? It's like that's not an ecological approach. Like, yeah. Literally, if you're empowered to do all these things, right? And so who you choose as your role model and as your leader, again, as Brandon said, wonderful to have people to emulate.
Mm-hmm.
But who are you emulating?
Yep.
Right? And it's very disappointing to see. So I'll share a personal one. I have a cousin who is a very successful fitness trainer. And I introduced him to Tony Robbins. And Tony Robbins, once again, if it was just as simple that he's a bad guy, then we wouldn't be talking about him, has a lot of value. You take what you need, right? This is what I always kind of say, don't have one singular teacher. Yep. Learn from a variety of sources, especially if they contradict each other.
Yeah.
Learn from people who are scientists, learn from mystics, learn from priests, learn from shamans, learn from doctors, learn from You know, exactly. They're like just draw from variety of sources. What I learned from Tony Robbins is state.
Yeah.
And for my cousin who's a fitness trainer, being in a good state physically is at the heart of the practice.
Yep.
So he took Tony's teachings and he does like one-on-one personal training. And he has transformed his business. He's got, several, tens of thousands of followers on Instagram now, and he's making it big. But when Robbins came out with his kind of, different take on the lockdown, which he did kind of early on,
Yeah.
my cousin kind of started sending me stuff because, like, now your hero has decided that this is not what you think it is.
Yep.
Was that based in fact? Yeah. Right. It's one of those things. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, it's fine. I was going to say there's just a couple of things I wanted to point out surrounding that. So first, I want to go back to so I'm not currently in an Avalon training, but what I will tell you about them is this: there's a couple of things that, even though I'm not really fully involved in their community right now, I will shill for them. And this is the couple of reasons for that are: number one, they're not continuously trying to shovel shit in your face. So they're not saying to you, "You need this to survive." Number two, they actually give a fuck about their community after you're done graduating. After you go through the program, they're constantly checking up on you. How you doing? Do you need any support? What can we do to get, do you want to get involved in the community? This is what we have going on. They're not trying to sell you constantly. Number three, there's always a lot of integrity in what they're doing. Again, they're not telling you that you need this to survive. They're not telling you that you need this to function. They're not trying to build a cult following. And to that point, they're also not trying to... they're not trying to breed a gigantic corporation. They're actually doing the work, and they're trying to stay small. And I just wanted to clear that up for a second because.
Sorry, yeah.
No,
and I should add too. Yeah, and I should add too. There's another coach I've worked with prior to me kind of joining Avalon. Her name is Sarah. I'm not sure how comfortable she is me plugging her this way because she's very low key in her marketing, right? But she does. She's based in Hamilton, and she does coaching mostly centered around your body, like body positivity, being truly authentically you, like the real authenticity, not what anybody else says, including her, is authentic. And her whole thing is this: she was waiting to get a certification with some type of therapeutic practice, right? And she has that now. So she's both a therapist and a coach. So you do have coaches out there who are fantastic. When I coached her, right, I was expecting, I was in that inquiry of getting back into this world. And when I offered to coach with her, I was expecting like a 6-week program, an 8-week program. It's going to cost me $2,000. She's like, no, I only do one-off sessions.
Yep. And
I was like, damn, that is so cool, right? She's not trying to keep me forever. Because her whole thing is like, I gotta fix. The other thing about this industry is like, do they actually fix the problem that you came to them with?
Yep. Exactly.
Now I will say for Signpost they did. There's numerous things that they were able to help me fix permanently, right? But not others. And what I like about I think there's a new generation of people in personal development. She's this girl Sarah is in her, I believe she's in her late 20s, early 30s. So maybe Gen Z will come up with a different version that isn't rooted in just mindless prosperity gospel or just that whole kind of gaslighting thing where it's like, that's not authentic. Well, yeah, that's what I really think. No, it's not authentic, right?
Right.
And
I
think, and that's it. Yeah. So
that's the last thing I wanted to say about Avalon was that they're not training us to sell their coaching.
Yeah.
Like when they train us, it's so we can go out and do our own thing. And then if people want to go and say, well, how do you do what you do? Well, we have these people. But we're not being trained to go out and sell Avalon,
Yeah, no. And what they do is actually, their specialty is to train people who are most of why I joined is like, this isn't my first rodeo, but their program, I'm an existing coach. I do story coaching and consultation, right? I do writing coaching. So for people who are writing books and who run into problems, I can tell you, when you have trouble writing a book, it's not because of I'm not here to coach you on English or grammar or spelling. Your issue with you writing the book has nothing to do with the book. It has everything to do with the fact that maybe your grade 2 teacher told you sucked at writing, and you're still kind of getting over that trauma, right? That was inflicted on you by an educator, or maybe your parents just don't believe it, right? They equip coaches who are already coaches. And that's kind of the key difference. Whereas Signpost reaches out to the general public, and they'll take on anybody really who signs up for them.
Yeah.
Right. So just the second point I was going to make, kind of moving away from Avalon, and just to Jody's point, like, there are so many people in this world that you could choose to emulate. But I think one of the big things that people need to look at is the integrity of the person, as Jody was mentioning. Like, there are hundreds of people that you could, like Bill Gates, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, who's now the richest man in the world, apparently. And, you know, Jody and I have a friend who's going to kill me for saying this, but as many of the cool things that Elon Musk is doing, he's not a great person. He's not a good guy, you know? Like, he's
and that's really
doing his thing.
That's really sad.
To make his money. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's sad, and it's also to be expected. We're in this, you know, this is a, you know, in a lot of ways, this is kind of this is going to take us way big picture, right? We're not exactly a healthy society.
No.
Right? The way that we set things up, the way that we pollute the earth, the way that we create all these stigmas, and the way that we demonize each other systematically, right? The fact that, you know, collectively everybody who lives in North America forgets that we have a settler colony that's based on the bones of indigenous people we wiped out years ago, right?
Yeah.
Even if we ourselves as individuals didn't do it, we have a lot of stuff in our shadow. Excuse me, our collective shadow. But we set up a game in which if you play by these rules and kind of adhere to these certain behaviors, you'll win. You'll win money.
Yep.
So yeah, it's no surprise that the more you're willing to play this sick game, the sicker you become. But you're going to win.
Yeah, and that's why I think self-development and self-improvement is so important, because I feel like as we grow, we're chipped away at by the world and society that we live in so much that our mindset becomes, how do I win? And how do I win definitively? Where no one can take away my win, because I'm super protective of this win now. I got this win, I got this money, I'm putting it away, I'm stacking my chips, and I'm going to fuck over whoever I need to fuck over to keep this win. Because God forbid someone takes my win away, and so God forbid someone knocks me down a couple of pegs. And I think that's why self-development and self-improvement is so important, because we're forced to take a hard look at what and who we fucked over in our, and I think this is where Signpost actually does a good job of making us take a hard look at the shit that we're feeding ourselves to try and get our wins.
Yeah.
And I'll play off of that too. Sorry, I'm feeling the vibe of this one, right?
Okay.
On top of that, I think moving forward, the contingency on coaches and personal growth experts and anyone who's basically a guru, if you're going to do what you're doing, you cannot ignore the fact that the climate's turning on us. You cannot ignore the big picture. That you can't ignore systematic inequality, right?
Yeah.
You cannot. You just can't bypass these things. And I think what makes a lot of people who hire these coaches uncomfortable, or maybe who don't hire them, or what makes people uncomfortable is realizing, yeah, I screwed people over, but maybe they didn't believe that they did. They thought they did everything on the up and up, and didn't realize that how they got to where they are was the result of generated a lot of unintended consequences for people they'll never meet.
Yep.
I did an edit for an ethical fashion designer based in Toronto she does outsourcing for garment manufacturers in India, right?
Right.
But her whole thing was to find manufacturers who not only had great working conditions for their employees, but who also were environmentally friendly, right? Because buying our cheaply made clothes creates a lot of pollution for the people who make them and where they live.
Yep.
Whether it's the chemical cast-offs or the dyes that end up in rivers or contaminated farmland, right? Or the fact that workers are exposed without protective equipment to these chemicals all the time. So she did, so we talked about that, right? Ethical business is the way forward if we want to survive, right? And I think it's incumbent upon coaches that if you're going to help somebody become a success, who knows, post-pandemic, maybe the value system, if you look at all the marketing stuff for self-help, do you want to, typically see pictures of mansions, or there's talk of being wealthy or having yachts, right? Or living that rich lifestyle.
Yeah.
Perfected lifestyle. How sustainable or how regenerative is that wealthy lifestyle? No, that's the same shit that's killing us.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So, like, maybe the way that coaching moves forward into the future is, yeah, to include that ethical component, to include an ecological component, that what you do actually impacts other people, right?
Yeah.
And to make sure that, yes, how you get success matters.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll step off my soapbox.
So good.
To that point, though,
well,
to that point, I also wanted to say real quick, I say the people that we fucked over, but I'm not going to get too preachy with this, but one of the people that you could fuck over that they're going to force you to take a look at in self-development that you fucked over is yourself. Yeah. You know, and the way that you sort of mess things up for you, and
oh yeah,
like if you look at you know, people who have grown up, like Donald Trump, for example, one of the theories as to why he's such a shitty human being is because he has all this expectation, this trauma back from his childhood, and he turned that into, well, now I have to be this big, powerful person. But if you actually are forced to take a look at yourself through self-development and say, well, hey, I don't have to deal with that. I don't have to make that the focal point of my life. And actually, I can actually be a better human being by tackling this trauma, by tackling this stuff. You know, once you stop fucking yourself over, the integrity and the growth and you know, all of that bullshit that you've essentially made into the focal point of you and how you grow and how you develop and what your personality now is, kind of, you know, you can make that go away and develop yourself into the person that you want to be, which can ultimately be a better person than these millionaires, billionaires who are just constantly fucking over people, whether it be their workers or the world or their society or what, or the purpose of wealth.
Yeah, well, if I could kind of jump in and say, because I'm not, I've been told, because you see, as far as my coaching experience goes, I've coached with Signpost, but I have I've run workshops for people on the autism spectrum to, you know, talk about building social groups and making friends. And I did all this based off of an idea I had for a documentary film that and to a degree, I still have this idea for a documentary. I'm still trying to make it, but the whole idea is that my coaching experience is more limited. I've been told to expand with it, but I'm just going to say this, because a lot of my career ambitions focus on filmmaking. You guys were talking about, you know, when you told me that story about how, you know, being in the same restaurant as Donald Trump and wanting to buy a drink for them, that's because, like, you know, these people, you know, see these, you know, millionaires and billionaires, and like I do get that there's a gratifying experience with wanting to be in the same room as a celebrity or in the same room as a millionaire or someone who's successful. When you actually get a job in the film industry, and Lyle, maybe you can jump in and relate to part of this, but Lyle has been on the set of, you know, the guy, he spoke to the guy who played Robin in the live action Teen Titans show. Is that correct? Or yeah, it was cool. Show. It was a cool experience. That I'll give him the opportunity to talk about it if he wishes to.
I mean, you kind of gave the gist, but the idea was like I was just dollying. I was doing dolly work for the show, and the guy was like, the actor was like kind of he was all stressed out. It's like, oh, I'm trying to remember who was the guy who directed Three Kings and Silver Linings Playbook and American Hustle. God damn it! And I kind of like came behind my dolly and I was just like, David O. Russell. He's like, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So
I thought that was kind of cool because like Robin's my favorite superhero, and I had a discussion with a real life Robin. So
well, the point is, like, you know, you understood that you're there to work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the point of when this is Lyle and mine's perspective, just being in the film industry, but because I've gone to the Toronto International Film Festival and I've networked there, the feeling of, you know, being in the same room as celebrities is, while it's cool it goes beyond just wanting to be in the same room with them. You know, when I talk to other filmmakers, telling someone that I've been in the same room as Matt Damon or the same room as why does his name escape me? The guy who directed When Harry Met Sally.
Rob Reiner.
Rob Reiner, yeah.
I'm just good at calling out names.
Yeah, you really are, man.
That's my superpower.
You're saving the day here, man. So, like, you know, being in the same room as Matt Damon or being in the same room as Rob Reiner, which I can say I've done, when I tell that to other filmmakers, they don't fawn over me the way someone outside the film industry. They'd be like, "Oh my God, Evan, that's so cool." They just say, "Oh, nice, yeah." We go there, we want to be in the same room with them because we want to hear them talk and their ideas. We don't want to just go there just to say, "I've been in the same room with them." Like, it's cool to tell people. And by the way, the story of how I got into the same room as Matt Damon was, there was a press in TIFF 2015. The Martian premiered at the festival, and even though, see, I had a pass that got me into, you know, press screenings and some press conferences, and even though I wasn't a journalist, I just pulled out a notebook and pretended to, and was actually writing things down. But I got into the first row of a press conference with The Martian where these, like, well-paid film critique journalists from around the world were there to talk about the movie, to listen to them talk about the movie. And there was a panel, and I kid you not, I was like 15 feet away from, you know, the main cast and crew of The Martian. Like, I saw Ridley Scott as clearly as I see my computer screen now. I saw Matt Damon, I saw Donald Glover, Jessica Chastain, Michael Pena, all those guys, Chiwetel Ejiofor. So, you know, at first it was cool, but then once you listen to them talk about the work they do, you understand that they're just people. And when people outside the film industry hear that, they think that, you know, "Oh, Evan, you made eye contact with gods." They're not gods, they're people. So I can't really relate to the whole, if I'm in the same room as Donald Trump, I'm going to be tempted to buy a drink. I can't really relate to that because I understand that he's a human being. He's there. So I can understand why people would, you know, be eager to, you know, get autographs of celebrities or famous people or be on the same call as a millionaire. But to me, I just relate to that differently. And
and I'm the same way.
Yeah,
I'm the same way in the sense of, like, sorry, go on, Tim.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Brent. Here, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I mean, I relate to that too in the sense of, like, if I was in the same room as, like, Will Smith or Matt Damon or something like that, like, I would never tell anyone that story because to me it's inconsequential. Like, when people say, you know, they ask the question, "Well, if you could have dinner with anybody, living or dead, who would it be?" My answer is always George Carlin, and the reason is
that's a good choice.
Not only is he an amazing human being, or was an amazing human being, but I feel like him and I could actually have quality conversation about not just comedy, not just show business, but the world and what's going on in it and what could be done to fix things, because he was just a smart guy. And to me, that's consequential celebrity interaction.
Yeah.
I don't care if I'm in the same room as Oprah. Did Oprah and I have a great conversation? Did we actually talk about, like, the world and what's going on in it and, like, how we can make a difference? That's the story I'll tell, because that's actually that means something.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm as cool as Brandon is. Like, I would, I mean, I hear you too. Like, I used to work at the call center concierge for Amex, so we get, like, we only serve, like, the rich people, right?
Yeah.
And like, there was always that kind of faint hope that you, including a few celebrities, there's always that kind of faint hope you'd get a celebrity calling you on the queue.
Yeah.
I do know that I have totally fangirled out on social media because I wrote a blog that was once shared by the cast members of Dirk Gently, and I was like, that was one of my favorite shows, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, but I hear what Brandon's saying is, like, if you're in the room and you're a professional, right? You're in that professional context.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't, like, you can't lose your shit. That's not professional. You know, you're in that kind of tier of society at that point when you're engaging with them, right?
Yeah.
But you see, I mean, I want to think, and this is where we're at risk of a Dunning-Kruger type of thing, where it's like, we can't, you know, we like to think that we're kind of sophisticated enough that we wouldn't do that, but we don't know. I think, but you know what's funny too? I think that same quality that we're talking about in terms of the, you know, buying into a cult personality, whether it's at a seminar or something, right? Like, I met Bob Proctor. I met Bob Proctor when he was doing one of his plugs for that MLM company, which later on he got in trouble for. Now, Bob here's what was both kind of cool and also disappointing when I met Bob, right? He is exactly the cool part is he's exactly how he looks in all of his videos. The same haircut, the same well-coiffed, well-tailored suit, everything, right?
Yeah.
That's the cool part. The disappointing part is that he's exactly the same person that he is in his videos. The well-coiffed hair and the cut suit. It's like, I didn't meet. There was no real depth to it. And when we did talk, he seemed kind of snarky, right?
Yeah.
He's like, really? What? How do you spell your name? Right? And I have a picture of it. Well, I did until my Facebook got deleted, but I had a picture of him, right? Where he's kind of got this. He's not really smiling in the picture. He's wincing because I was gushing, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like I didn't know what to say. This is pre-signpost, but basically, like, I hadn't gotten a sense of myself, right? And I think like my hero is dead, Anthony Bourdain, right? I would love to meet Anthony Bourdain because by all accounts, he was that type of guy that would just shoot the shit with you and talk about restaurants and talk about, you know, rock music and stuff. Right?
Which is amazing.
He was just a guy. And if I was in the room, on the other hand, with Oprah, I would probably find a way to make it weird. I don't know because I don't know what to talk to her about.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, hey, I'd be like, hey, so you're in Toronto? Oh, well, what brings you here? Like, it would just be one of those things. What brings you here? What are you doing? Right?
Yeah, I'll be honest, Jody. You said the whole thing about Dirk gently retweeting you. Like that you said I wouldn't be as cool as Brandon, but let me be honest. Like that's where the consequential bit comes in because best believe if I share a podcast and it's retweeted by somebody that I look up to, that I think I love the work of, I'll fangirl also. So don't get it twisted there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's good, but you know what? That enthusiasm. What's funny is like that enthusiasm, right? Is exactly the kind of thing that, you know, can get you into trouble, right? We're the overall context of what we're talking about is that desire to get recognized can be weaponized, right? It can be taken in a predatory sense, right? If you don't have a healthy functioning.
Yeah.
And this kind of goes back, you know, trying to keep it on topic as much as we can. This goes back to some of the predatory aspects of the personal growth world, where it's like they find the people whose self-esteem is rooted in people pleasing, right?
Yeah.
And in meeting your heroes and in really just getting famous, right, and getting known. That's unhealthy. That's the unhealthy part of it. That's where you get people swooning over really just a guy who runs an MLM company, thinking that he's like Brad Pitt, right? And it's like that's really not that's not healthy either.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, just to kind of bring this on home, because I'm just I'm trying to be mindful of the time. I want to be respectful of everyone's time here, but I feel like, you know, if we could kind of bring this topic on home, I would kind of like want to say, you know, what's like, you know, a message we could send to the listeners, like back at home. And we've covered some like great topics this morning about, you know, taking in all this knowledge and like personal growth and just taking what works for you and leaving out what doesn't, and just letting ideas contradict one another. I'm going to tell a story just to kind of bring this on home to what we're talking about. So I felt inspired to talk about the flaws of personal growth and development and the toxicity and the cons in coaching, because we're in a global pandemic, the likes of which we've never seen in our lifetime. And what's happening is there's a clash between conspiratorial thinking and science-based thinking. Like, the person in my family who is very much into the conspiracies likes to tell me about how there are thousands of doctors who are saying the lockdowns are ineffectual, like they're not going to stop the virus. This is not going to stop the virus. The vaccine won't stop the virus, yada, yada, yada. But, I also have an immediate family member who raised me as anti-vax because, according to them, when I was a baby, my parents got me vaccinated for the typical stuff you get vaccinated for when you're an infant. But apparently, according to this family member, I had a bit of an allergic reaction to one of the vaccines where, you know, I was, you know, coughing, crying, and there was a swelling on my leg, you know, the size of a golf ball, like when I was a baby. And, you know, they frantically called, you know, Kids Help Phone to describe what I was going through, and then Kids Help Phone just said, you know, oh, this is completely normal, like, this is, your baby's not going to die in your arms, don't worry. And then this family member said, no, this is not normal. And admittedly, it sounds like a fear-based reaction, but as a result of this reaction, like, both in my body and the way my family member reacted, I was brought up with this whole vaccines are not safe, like they do more harm than they do good. So now that we're in a situation where the COVID-19 vaccine is being distributed, and we are slowly but surely getting to herd immunity and killing this virus so we can have it not be a threat anymore, so we can go back to the way of life, or enter a new way of life that, you know, is integral for the planet. I'm in a situation right now where if it's for the greater good of my loved ones, should I get the vaccine? So I called my family doctor, who admittedly is not a crack. He's not a quack or anything. He just believes in Eastern medicine and homeopathics more so than Western medicine. He cannot legally condone or condemn vaccines, because in North America, if you do that, if a doctor condemns vaccines, they can lose their license. So, like their license to practice medicine. So what happens is, my doctor very calmly explained to me, I understand, Evan, I understand that you have concerns about, you know, what happened to you when you were an infant, and I don't know if it was medically documented because of the severity of your reaction, but I will say this, like, in North America, like, vaccines are very, like, much the way that we deal with diseases. In other parts of the world, like in Eastern medicine, vaccines are not the way they deal. There are vaccines in that part of the world, don't get me wrong, it's just that they prefer, like, homeopathics before vaccines. I'm not trying to sell essential oils. I believe that, you know, essential oils are useful. Like, if I have a cold or whatever, I'm going to take essential oils. I'm not going to, before I take Tylenol. But if I have something more serious, like an infection, I'm going to take an antibiotic for that, because essential oils won't help a serious infection that could kill me. So, in terms of the COVID vaccine, my family doctor said, considering how, if all you want to know is will you die from taking the COVID vaccine, probably not, because your reaction that you had when you were an infant was not an anaphylaxis, which is a life-threatening allergic reaction. So based on that, I called my doctor to talk about this, because I want to know, based on my family's reaction, because they set it up like I was going to die and that the vaccine ruined me. But I have no long-term health problems. I have no chronic health problems. And apparently I was vaccinated, so, like, all I wanted to know was, if I choose to get the COVID vaccine, am I either going to die or develop long-term health problems? And the answer so far is no. I'm probably going to be fine, because I have a strong immune system and I'm a relatively healthy person. I'm a mostly healthy person. So I feel like, you know, it goes back to this point we're making. Take into account everything you hear, but ultimately judge for yourself. And, you know, listen to everybody. Don't, you know, conform. Don't be a free thinker, because I hate the term free thinking. Just take in everything and make your own decisions, but don't try to put your biases aside. I'm sorry if I'm kind of botching the wording on this, but try to put your biases aside. That's all I want to just hit home here.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's like, knowing that about your history, right? There's a lot of folks, like, this kind of goes to the narrative around the vaccination. It's so funny you say that. While you were talking, like, before you started, I just randomly had this thought, right? I posted on my Instagram. I was just like, in my stories, I was just like, who has vaccine FOMO right now? You know, like, because, like, I'm on 3 waiting lists for the AstraZeneca,
right,
just so I can get the first dosage done, right? And it's like, there's got to be. I was posting that. I was just thinking, oh shit, I'm gonna get unfollowed by no doubt like 5 of my woo-woo friends, I'm sure, at this point, for even suggesting that, you know, people are actually getting vaccine envy, right? That some people are getting it without others, right? And that goes to the narrative. You think vaccines are an evil thing, and suddenly there's this worldwide pandemic where the virus is kind of like, okay, if this was Captain Trips, if this was the plague from the movie, from like the book The Stand by Stephen King, right, where there's like a 98% fatality rate within 3 days, right? They would take more decisive measures. But it's the uncertainty around, do you have it? Do you not have it? Right? Does it take a while to manifest the symptoms? And even if you do get sick, are you going to die? Right? Because it's in that kind of middle ground of severity. It's hard for some people. Some people only react to something decisively when they're sure about it. Does that make sense?
In a way, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, like if you there's an immediate threat. You catch this thing and you're gonna break out in. Okay, if it was airborne herpes, for example, sorry to be crass, but
Oh
if this
god.
was airborne like if this was airborne genital herpes, right? Guaranteed there'd be like a more militant immediate response by some of the people who are now kind of marching against this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But because there's an immediate effect, right? You could recognize that. But because there's that kind of gray area, into that gray area of uncertainty goes your own narrative around what it is. Because especially when they come and say that the only cure is the same form of medical treatment that you've been saying has been evil and destructive, right?
Yeah.
To your body that they're trying to suppress for so long. It's easy that you could come up with the idea that this was a planned pandemic, the plandemic, right? As a conspiracy around the world by the invisible elites, you know, the Lord of the Flies monster, right? That no one ever sees, to basically get everybody implanted with this weird microchip in the vaccine.
Yeah.
So you see how narrative is powerful, right? And so narrative, why I bring that up is like that's one of the big conspiracies that many of the people in this industry have, right? Again, when the majority of people do not fit into typical society and they want more out of life, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a freelancer, right? Like I decided to do what I did because a 9 to 5 society job wasn't for me, right? A lot of what they taught me in school didn't turn out to be reality. It wasn't for me. So I didn't have the success according to society's rules. So I went into and going into personal development, I wanted to live a different life. If you have that mentality of wanting to live a different life than everybody else, then you're more prone to believing these things, right? And so I know you wanted to bring this home. What direction did you want to take this in?
Just kind of like, a closing remark, like, what can we say to kind of, because we're in a situation right now where we're kind of in this peer war with those that believe that in the vaccine and those that don't, and like those
I think ultimately the vaccine's going to win because ultimately. So my mom is terrified of me getting AstraZeneca because the headlines went and said, oh, it causes blood clots. When you look at the numbers, right, the percentage of blood clots per million is so low, I may as well buy a scratch ticket.
Not only that,
the odds are just as great of getting a blood clot, and even if you get one, the clots are treatable. It's not like the fatal one.
Yeah, right? But here's the thing.
In Canada, we had since we launched AstraZeneca, we've had maybe like 2. But this is where that same mindset gets in. So I want to focus. We could, again, that's a whole other thing we could talk about, right? But the point is, like I am convinced that the coaching world, almost everything we've learned about coaching and personal development was based in a world that no longer exists, right? I think based on the last year of having to get this big reflection, this time out to think about what it is we really want, right? I think any coaching that focuses on simple empowerment, right? And like my aspirations are not mansions. I want to own like a detached house, I want to own a detached house, find somebody to marry and have kids with, and have a life where I'm not spending the majority of my time working. I think that seems to be a more reasonable goal, and I don't think I'm alone in this, right? I think if coaching's got to be evolved, we've got to look at the ecology, how we affect the environment and people around us. We can't bypass issues. We need to look in our shadow all the time, right? And to see where we're doing wrong. And I think like to have coaching, for coaching to have value, you also need to have a real ethical code of conduct that you actually follow, and that you take responsibility for what you're responsible for.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's got to go moving forward. And ultimately it centers around this, and I think I may have done this on a previous episode, is like you got to focus on the world you want to have and align with that in all of your practices. And how you get there matters.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Brandon, anything you want to add to that, or?
Well, I definitely agree with Evan's point where, you need to be cautiously optimistic of if you're going to go forward with coaching. Exactly. Listen to everything, look at everything, do your research, and go in the direction you want to go in. Everyone seems to be drawn towards, the people who are involved in the call all seem to be drawn towards, like, one idea or one thought or one outcome. And the one thing I would really want to drive home is that, don't live for other people. Live for yourself, because it's your life, and your life is going to impact people around you, but ultimately it's also going to impact who you are and how you live your life and who you are at the end of the day. I'm going to say a bad word here because you guys sort of brought it all back to the big picture. And honestly, I believe in socialism. Like, I believe that we can eventually get to a point where the world is run not by capital, but by the people, by putting out, working together as a society, working together, not working to see who we can fuck over the hardest or the most vehemently, but ultimately working together to create a society that works and that benefits everyone and ultimately gets rid of class inequality and racism and systematic issues. And I think really coaching and personal development is at the very core of that, because we need to get rid of our own personal shit or work on siphoning through our own personal shit to really start bringing all of that to the forefront, to actually start building a society like that. So ultimately, bringing it home would be, to me, is like, do your research, look at getting involved in coaching, getting involved in personal development, because once you actually start removing all the trauma and the issues that you develop from the world chipping away at you, life really opens up and you can do great things and come together with great people to build a society that you can actually be proud of.
Yeah. I feel like that's a great note to end on.
Well said.
Yeah,
for sure.
Anyways, yeah, so thank you, gentlemen, very much for your time this morning. This has been a really insightful discussion. A little bit, we got a little deeper into like other topics than what we're used to on the show, but we're always used to like diversity of ideas, diversity of opinions, and it was good to have you and to just get a lot of this off our chests. So yeah.
Yep.
Anyways,
thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you next time. Okay, take care.